Hi everyone, you're here with me, Kirsty Denny, in the Neurodiversity Controversy segment here on the Ananda Rose channel. And tonight I'm here with BeAta Fuller. Welcome, BeAta.
Hi, Kirsty. Good to
Yeah, so it's really cool to have you here. So BeAta is a coach. She does coaching for all sorts of people, including parents and families, and she has a really interesting background in behavioural and developmental optometry. So this is relevant, of course, to the neurodiversity angle because she would have worked with heaps of children, and I'm sure we'll get into this, who either were struggling with particular academic skills or behavioural skills, or who had diagnoses of things like ADHD, autism, sensory processing, the works, I imagine. And what's what we're going to hopefully talk about a bit tonight, which is super interesting, is she's developing or has developed, it's in motion, this framework for alternative education, which is called the Seven Seeds of Success. And the tagline is something like, is it learning or education through simplicity, which I really like. Um, so
Yeah, keeping it.
I think we could start anywhere with this, but maybe what was the inspiration for the seven seeds of success?
So the inspiration was my own educational experience or schooling experience, because I actually make a distinction between schooling and education. They're not the same thing. So
Mm,
my schooling
yeah.
experience from a very young age, I could see that what was going on in the classrooms wasn't what should be going on. So I was really observing and when I say young age, I mean very young. I started school when I was 6, which was a year
Mm,
earlier than where I was at the time in Eastern Europe. And even before that, even in preschool, I was observing how kids were learning, what they were learning, and how a lot of the kids that were labeled as disruptive and behind and all of those things, which back in my time didn't actually have names or diagnoses,
mm,
but I could see how a lot of them were smarter than me. And yet I was the one that all the teachers were saying was the smart one. And I was looking at these kids going, I know nothing compared to these guys. So through years of observation, of course, that led me, it was my passion. So it led me to my profession as a behavioral optometrist, which is all about how it's way beyond what people see as optometry. It's all about how we perceive the world, everything that comes in through the senses gets processed, and then how we respond to the world as a result of that processing. So led me to that career where I was working with kids one-on-one. And all through that time, I had this passion for going further and going deeper. So one sunny morning in Barcelona, a few years ago, I was laying in bed, and you know how you're just kind of laying there in that alpha brainwave state, half asleep, half awake. And all of a sudden, I literally, I didn't intend to, but I sat up in my bed, and my partner was next to me. I was like, what? What just happened? It's like my body set up. I grabbed the notebook that I always have next to my bed, and I just wrote down the words seven seeds of success. And at the time, I'd had a framework that was like 5 conditions of learning and 5 things, 5 key things that every human needs to learn to succeed at life. So I'd had that. And then all of a sudden, Barcelona, looking out the window at Spain, and I get the seven seeds of success. So of course I wrote it down, I laid back down, and immediately I was like, but I've only got 5. What's the other 2? And then within over the next 30 minutes or so, the other 2, one of the 5 went away, 3 came in, and there it was. So that's the story of how it was born. So it's something that was always there. I always knew that there's certain things that humans need to learn to be okay in life, to succeed at life.
Mm.
And that they're not school subjects, that they're not the things that are being taught or learned at school. So I came up with 5 of them and then expanded to 7 and then formalized it in a framework. And the rest, as they say, is history. Here we are.
Mm. Yeah, I love that real kind of eureka moment, divine inspiration. But of course, it was, weaving together all those things that you already had, you already had an awareness of, and just bringing them into more of a structure, I suppose. Um, yeah. And I believe your own children were largely educated outside of school, or they did most of their learning outside of school. Is that correct?
Yeah, they were my guinea pigs.
Yeah.
They were, because it's one of those things where, as a parent, I always looked at kids because I knew I wanted to be a parent when I was really young. Um, and a bit of the motivation for that was, I think I can do this better than what the adults are doing, right? So I guess I was quite arrogant as a child, right? In my childhood, thinking, oh yeah, I could do better than what the adults are doing. Little did I know of what's actually involved, as every parent
Mm,
will tell you, right? That if you've got these ideas, this is how I'm going to do it, and then the child's there and it all goes out the window, and there you are, and you just deal with what's in front of you. However, what it led to was me really observing kids. So through my late teens and my 20s, especially because I was working with children from about 18 onwards, I was watching kids and I was seeing, the differences between different children. And sometimes I would come across children that were just awesome, that would come into my room, or if I met them in the street, if it wasn't in a work environment, just the way that they interacted with me, that the way that they interacted with the world, the way that they looked at things and were curious and were asking questions, and they could have a conversation. There was some of these kids that were just amazing. So I always ask the parents what they did differently. I'd go, hey, your kids are great, right? Your kids are cool. What are you doing? And interestingly, a lot of those parents said that they either lived on a farm or they were homeschooling. So I
mm,
got this idea that living on a farm and homeschooling, there's got to be something in it. And now I know that it's not those specific things.
mm,
What I've come to is that what it is that those kids have a focus on something other than school subjects. That yes, they might be going to school part-time, or their homeschooling might involve some kind of school type work, but they also have other things going on in their life, as you would when you're living on a farm, right? There's
mm.
other stuff that needs to happen. There's other skills that you need to develop. So,
Yeah.
yes, I always thought that I would homeschool my kids. And then, of course, they got to school age and off they went to school like everybody else, because I wasn't brave enough. Even with the knowledge that I had, I didn't have the guts to actually say, no, I'm not sending them to school at all. They
Mm,
only ever went 3 days a week, but they did go. And it was only when the school cracked down. So I'm grateful for that. The Department of Education cracked down and said, if these kids are going to be at school, they must come 5 days a week.
mm,
And I went to the school. It was interesting because I was actually working with a lot of the children at the school in the school grounds. So I was a big part of the school community and knew the teachers, and the teachers, themselves were great, but they were very limited in what they could apply in the school setting out of their own wisdom and knowledge. Anyway, I went to the school and said, you guys know that was never going to happen. Like, I was never going to have my kids at school 5 days a week. So 2 weeks later, we pulled them out, and we did it as a 6-month experiment that lasted for the rest of their schooling years. They never went back. And every 6 months, they had a choice. I always gave them the choice. I said, do you guys want to go back, or do you want to stay? The only rule that I had was that they both had to agree on the decision.
Well, it is really tricky to commute one and be home with another. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially as I was running a farm and a business, actually two businesses at the same time. And each 6 months they would kind of waver as it was coming up towards that time. And then every 6 months they chose to keep homeschooling once they weighed up the pros and the cons, until eventually one time they had a conversation with some of the children in the small town that we were living in that were at school. And they came home and said, look, we've just realized that we're actually not missing out on anything because all the kids that are at school don't want to be there.
Yeah.
So why would we do that? Until then they had this idea that maybe they were missing something. Maybe they were missing out on some stuff. And that conversation changed it. So after that, they never even considered going back. And when I speak to them now, they're grateful for it. They don't, some kids do, of course. You always
Yeah.
wonder what could have been.
Hmm.
What if I had done that instead, and would I be better off? It's always there in every child's mind, in every parent's mind, and that's normal. And I think it's just important to realize that whatever choices we make in life, that's the right choice because it's the choice we made, right?
Yeah,
It's
that's right. I
the only one
can't
that
get it perfect. There's not, yeah, not something to aspire to because it's not possible. And yeah, my boys have never been to school, um, and they're 10 and 12 now.
yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
They did have some times early on where, well, my eldest did because he's very extroverted, where he wondered if he was missing out just because there was all of that, at around age 5, 6, people as small talk ask, oh, so when are you starting school? And it's all about starting school. And so that there's that like, oh, I might be missing something. But yeah, he
And
certainly
also, I might be different, right?
he certainly
Everyone
doesn't
else
feel
is
that
going to
now.
school. Yeah.
He certainly doesn't. And there's a lot more to your seven seeds than freedom. But I feel like, especially in the early years, a lot of value is in having freedom to play, freedom to move, freedom to be outdoors. Um, and so talk to me about that, the importance of the movement and the feeling the body and how that supports the development.
Yeah, look, I mean, that's seed number one for a good reason, right? Seed number
Mm,
one too. And I'll speak to that a bit more later. But I do want to say something here in that a lot of people do kind of polarize. It's either school or freedom. And
yeah,
I like to stay on that middle ground, what I call freedom within a framework.
yeah,
So it's important to have the riverbanks because what I see a lot of homeschoolers fall into is they'll lean on the school curriculum because it's the only thing they know, or they'll let go of everything. But
yeah.
then often the children end up wondering, like, am I actually learning something? Am I learning the stuff that matters? And parents start to question and wonder. And what I see, I've seen hundreds of children grow up. So when I say what I see, I'm talking about a
Mm,
relatively large sample size. What I see often happen next is that parents say, oh, okay, so this play-based learning was great in primary school or elementary years, depending on which country you're in. But now that they're in high school, they better go to school because we need to get serious because they don't
mm.
have
That one
a
or the other,
framework.
yeah.
Exactly, because they don't have a
Mm,
framework to tell them that, yes, those kids are learning what they need to be learning that's going to serve them for the rest of their life. Because isn't that what every parent wants, right? Every parent wants to prepare their children for the future. And these days, we have no idea what that looks like. It's a really
yeah.
unique time. Gone are the days of the cobbler saying, you just learn my craft and you're going to be okay, right? Or the baker saying, you take over the family business and you're going to be okay. These days, if the kids follow what the parents did, they're going to be lost. Let's face it, because we just don't know. So that's where it's even more important than when I applied it with my sons, who are now 21 and 23. It's even more important now to be focusing on these foundational skills. So coming back to your question about play, I just wanted to make that distinction between freedom, between total freedom and actually having a framework, and I wouldn't call it boundaries, but I call it riverbanks. Because okay, let's talk about movement and play. So movement is absolutely important. Everyone who's familiar with child development, and crazily, a lot of parents aren't, right? Because it's not taught in schools. It's not taught anywhere. But anyone who has some knowledge of child development, of human development, knows that even in the womb, there's certain movements that the baby makes naturally that are already growing specific connections in the brain that are going to then lead to their ability to coordinate their physical body, their ability to put thoughts together, their ability to remember mathematical facts or do mathematical reasoning, their ability to do just about everything, right? It starts that early. And if mum is stationary during pregnancy, which let's face it, a lot of the time I was because of my work, some of those movements don't happen. So even going back that early, movement is super important. And then, of course, those first 3 years after birth, there's specific movements that babies make just naturally and toddlers make just naturally all over the world, every culture, every country. Kids are drawn to specific activities and specific movements, and there's good reason for that. They're essential. Now, the thing about freedom is that if a child in the womb or shortly after birth misses out on some of those movements because of the situation that the family's in, you know, be loving parents with all the best intentions, but sometimes, you know, kids grow up in a caravan, right? And they don't get to crawl, all those little things. If they miss out on some of those things, then there's certain play activities that they're going to avoid because they're not good at them, which means they've missed out on something over here. And if they're given complete freedom without the parent having some awareness of the movements that are important, that actually matter, then that gap is actually going to increase, because as humans, we naturally avoid the things that we had an unpleasant experience with, right? So if I'm no good at catching a ball because my eyes can't focus together and they can't tell me exactly where that ball is, and I've been whacked in the face, I'm going to then avoid all of those activities and actually not serve myself, because that focusing skill is a foundational skill for a lot of other things that I'm then not going to be able to do. So yes, movement is super important, but also with some awareness of what those key movement skills are. And it's not about creating another curriculum of my child must now make these movements, right? But it's just about
daily at the gym with your toddler.
Exactly. Okay, now raise your arm this far and all of that. But it's about observing and seeing what are some of the activities that the child is drawn to, which is great. It's great to play to that, but also seeing the other side and observing what are some of the things my child is avoiding and why might that be. Because,
Totally.
I'm going to add one more thing to that. I spent a lot of time in northern New South Wales and Australia here, where there is a lot of that, freedom parenting, which is beautiful. It's very love-centered. It's very much about the child. But the gap that I see is that often the parents, if a child is avoiding something, they'll say, well, that's just their journey and I'll let them avoid that. And often then those children end up with those gaps. So I find that it's very important to bring the polarities to the center and find that balance.
Yeah, I like that, because it is often, you you can get the extremes of this is the way it's done, or yeah, complete do what you want. You know, and sometimes it even goes as far as you can eat whatever you want, you can go to bed whenever you want. And sometimes that would work out perfectly,
Yeah.
but not always. And I know for us, when people ask what we do, if they don't know anything about homeschooling, I'll just say we homeschool. But if they do, I'll say we are natural learners or unschoolers because that's more what we do. But within that kind of general philosophy, I'm still watching to see, yeah, where do they struggle?
Yeah.
What might they need help with? How can I help them with that in a way that is interesting for them and not a chore? So that type of thing. And I think it's very true that we will avoid things that are difficult. And often that's even more so with the children who may have a diagnosis like autism or ADHD because they can become very anxious. And so it's really important to get that balance between playing to strengths, not pushing the child into like a big stress state, but actually not wanting to have their world become really small and insular, which can happen. So it's definitely a balance. Yeah.
It is. And the thing I want to mention here is part of the key things about the seven seeds framework is that they are the seeds.
Mm,
So they are the seven foundational skills which develop throughout life on three levels: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, as everything does. So it's not education that begins when you turn 5 and ends when you turn 17, right? It's education that begins before you're born and ends at the other end.
yeah.
Now, the key thing about that is, and this is a lot of my work in my behavioural optometry times, is that because they're the foundational skills, let's say your child is struggling with writing. One of my earliest mentors, Meredith Graham, who's now involved in an amazing project called Read Write. She's brought it to
Mm,
Australia from America. Anyway, one of the things that I remember that she used to say is, don't do more of what you don't know how to do with the kids. So if a child is struggling with writing, don't do more writing. Like, don't make
mm,
them do more of what they don't know how to do. That's
yeah.
a problem-based approach. And of course, all it does is reinforces their belief that they don't know how to do it, right? It's
Yeah.
the practicing the thing that you're not good at is not a great way to go forward. Now, I'm not saying that practice isn't important, but you must have a level of skill where the basic task isn't, you said, a chore. It's not so
Mm,
difficult that the child constricts and goes into a paralysis, right?
yeah.
Where they're stiffening up. That's not a positive way to do anything. Now, let's say it's writing, if we're talking about that, there are specific things that underpin the skill of writing. So if you think about it, if you think about the act of writing, if someone's struggling, you've got to reverse engineer and say, where's the block? Is it the fact that they can't translate what they're thinking into the movement of the pen? Is it the
Mm,
actual forming of the letters? Is it the feeling in their fingertips? Is it the fact that they've got an unresolved primitive reflex? I won't go into that. People can look it up, primitive reflexes,
yeah.
which means that the moment they start to write and their arm is going that way, their head actually wants to turn the opposite way or that way, and they have to force it to focus. Or is it actually that they can't focus on the page? There's so many elements to the process of writing that if you can work on the foundational skills, and you don't need to be an engineer and reverse engineer it, if you work on the 7 seed skills, automatically the skill of writing will come together. Now, there's another thing that I want to speak to here, and that's about in the neurodiverse community, or whatever name you want to put on it, the kids, the people that are, I'm not even going to say different to the norm, but that don't perform, either aren't willing to because they can see through the veil and aren't willing to perform to the norm, or physically aren't able to perform to the norm, right? So we're talking in that community. There is, as you said, a large proportion of people in that community who do go into stress quite easily.
Yeah.
Now, one of the most common reasons that children and adults go into the freeze response is a retained very early either fear paralysis reflex or the Moro reflex.
Yeah.
Which is something that should be integrated very early on. And if it isn't, it means that that person throughout their entire life, the moment something is put in front of them that they believe they're not able to do or can't handle, they go into freeze. And there's no point doing anything when someone's in that state. While coming back to movement, there's just these really simple movements that you can do with that person as a child or an adult. I didn't learn about these till I was in my 40s. And I'm going to say it changed my life. It changed my
I've done
life.
these on myself as well
You
as
have?
my
Familiar with them? Yeah.
There's no age limit. Yeah. It's good.
Yeah, it's the most powerful stuff. If you've got someone who goes into freeze, then these simple movements change things. I woke up with anxiety every single day of my life until I was about 48. And I didn't know that's what was happening because I'd never known anything different. And then I
And
went
it's a
into this
baseline.
course.
Yeah.
Right, that was my baseline. It was just more or less, right? That was, and I just labeled as an excitement for the day, right? I just thought, okay, I must be excited for the day. And that's how I got through life. But sometimes I'd wake up and freeze. And then I did the primitive reflexes course. I've done it twice now, the first 3 levels. And of course, I took the course for my clients, not for me, right? As you do.
Yeah.
The mother and the giver. But of course, part of taking the course meant that I had to do things on myself before I unleashed it onto the people that I was working with. And one morning, all of a sudden, I woke up and I went, what's going on? And my body was calm, right? For the first time in almost 5 decades. So I share that because there's so many people who don't know, if mum's stressed during pregnancy, or if there's stuff going on in the family, even the simple thing of being separated from mum because mum has a health issue and can't be near the child at an early age, can set this stuff into motion. And this is what I love about the 7 Seeds framework, is that the solutions to massive issues are often really simple. Like they do take commitment, they do take doing things almost daily, but they're simple things and they don't take a long time.
Yeah.
That's powerful. You've obviously experienced it yourself. It can be life-changing to know a structure to work by that actually works for the community of people who aren't functioning, let's say, whether it's by choice, in terms of, I don't like the way society is, so I'm going to check out of that and I'm going to do things my own way, or it's just too stressful to engage with what's going on out there. For those people, these simple things can make a massive difference, because then they really have a choice. It's no longer then a case of, oh, I want to do this, my body won't do it. You actually get an actual choice.
Yes, and I think that's important to point out, that you're not saying people need to all do this in this order at this time. It's just a supportive structure, and people are still unique. People are still going to have their own skill sets and ways of doing things and their quirks and the rest of it, but it provides more scope for each person's genius when they have access. to all of these things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but I'm very careful about how I present this for people because let's face it, parents, especially these days, the marketing machine is going 24/7. So it's like, what else do I need to do? What else can I do? So often when I tell parents about the 7 Cs, they kind of go, okay, give me the framework, and now it becomes another curriculum and another tick list.
Yeah.
And what I speak about is knowing what is it that matters to that person, because nobody's going to have the perfect upbringing. It doesn't exist. It hasn't happened yet.
Mm.
So everyone's going to have some gaps in their development, right? There's no reason to feel guilty about all the things that all the opportunities you didn't provide for your children, all the things your kids missed out on. There's no reason for that because one, things can be filled in at any age,
Yes.
as we've proven, right? And
Mm.
many others. I've worked with people in their 70s that had massive shifts after applying the earlier version of the 7C framework.
Mm.
I've lost where I was going. Oh, yes. But also, like, I'm not a great runner. I'll never run a marathon.
Yeah,
And
that's not going to be your top thing.
I don't care. I'm not
Yeah.
going to spend time every day doing the movements that would integrate the reflexes that would make my body work better so that I could run because it doesn't matter to me.
Mm.
Right? If one day it begins to matter to me, I know that there's a way. I know that I can do stuff that's going to make me a better runner. But right now, the way my body is, it doesn't run easily. It's a struggle. I can do it. I get puffed, and it's no fun, right? So I do avoid it. I do avoid it, and I make a conscious choice that, okay, I don't need to work on that right now.
Yeah.
So it is important to know where to put your focus, to not be trying to work on everything and going for perfection. It's more a case of, and of course, the older the child is, the more it becomes obvious, but it's a case of, again, finding that balance between, okay, so there's these things that the child avoids because they're not good at them. And if they don't care about them, that's fine.
Mm.
However, I was talking to a dad the other day, and he has two sons. One of them is very good at basketball, the other one isn't. The first question I asked, I didn't suddenly say, well, your other son could good at basketball by just doing these things. The first question I asked was, does he want to be good at basketball? And the second question was, is it just to keep up with his brother?
Mhm.
Or is it an actual desire? And that's really important to keep in mind, to know that if somebody cares about something, then there is a way to make it happen at some level. So even I've worked with people with, so many letters after their name because of the
Mhm.
diagnosis. Once
Yeah, it's
upon a time,
alphabet
it
soup.
used to be
Yeah.
the PhDs, right? And now it's all the diagnoses. And, you know, again, it's that balance. Diagnoses are great, so the child knows that it's not, they're not just weird, there's stuff going on. But I think diagnoses should be a tool for awareness. They shouldn't be the end point. Okay, now my child has
Mm.
this diagnosis, so this is the box I'm going to put them in, and
Yeah.
then they can never go out of that box. I
Yeah,
think a
that's right. The
diagnosis,
brain is so incredibly flexible and it
exactly.
changes all the time. Yeah,
Yeah,
which is true for everyone, including people with diagnoses. It's,
yeah.
yeah,
And
so important.
yes, there are people that are born these days with certain skills that, let's say, are valued in our society that those young people don't have. But inevitably and invariably, every single one of them has other skills that the average person can't even imagine, right? And
That's
and I
right.
think
And
there
they
is
might
this
just
great
benefit from
shift.
having some of those other skills at a level where they scaffold those other amazing skills so they can offer them more to the world, eh? Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. Now, another story comes to mind. I was working with this young girl. She was at the time, I think she was already like 14 or 15, year 10 level. And she was an amazing artist. Like amazing, amazing. I lived in an area, as I said, northern New South Wales, very arty, very hippie kind of area. And even for that area, she was amazing. But she struggled with reading. You know, she was on that. I don't think she was ever formally diagnosed as dyslexic, but it was, you know, that's how she thought of herself, as dyslexic. So we did some work. She didn't particularly care about reading that much because she avoided it because she wasn't good at it.
Yeah.
But we did some work. Her reading got better in the sense that for what she wanted, so she could read something and get the meaning from it without it being as much of a problem. You know, she didn't have to reread it 3 times. Anyway, she got better. And one time we finished a session and her mum came to pick her up. And there they are at the door of my optometry practice. And this young girl's walking out and the mum's walking in, and you could feel the energy, that kind of teenage girl mum energy. And she said, "Mum, if we'd done this earlier, I could have been reading earlier." So she played the blame card, right? And I immediately jumped in, not to make peace, because it's an important conversation for them to have, but just to help her realize that there's limited real estate in the brain. And this is something that I learned from reading Norman Doidge's The Brain That Changes Itself over and over and over. I read that book about 5 or 6 times. And the key point is that had her mother focused on reading, had her mum said, "Okay, you really have to learn these letters and we're going to have to work on this," her art skills would not have developed to the level that they did. Right. So that was a great thing for her to realize. Like, there's always a price, right? So we always look at what we don't have and wish that we had it, but we very rarely look at what we do have and realize that perhaps we wouldn't have that developed to such a level of intricacy or skill or mastery had we had all these other skills. You know, it's a case of jack of all trades or master of one.
Yeah.
Right. So it's important to find that balance in everything. You know, I talk about balance a lot because I think it's just important to notice when we as parents, you know, I've been prone to it, going too far this way, going, okay, let's do these foundational skills and the worksheets, right? And this, just in case, just in case. So it's important to notice when we go too far to one side and just bring ourselves back to the middle. That's what life's about. It's that tightrope. And then noticing when we're leaning too far the other way, too far in that permissive way, and again, bring ourselves back to the middle and always focusing on what is it that matters? What's most important right now to the parent and to the child?
Yes, I completely agree with that. It's an ongoing process, and you don't have to panic if you, as you say, feel like you've gone too far one way or the other, because there's no cutoff where you can't learn new things or change or pivot.
We're
And
always swinging.
we're always swinging like a pendulum, and there's no reason you can't have your magnificent, unique genius and still develop other skills that are going to support you. And it's also okay to be a generalist. All of it's absolutely fine. It's about finding um, what speaks to you and how you live your best life, really, isn't it? Which is
Absolutely. And I
yeah.
think you put it really well. You know, if you have, everyone has their genius. Some people question that, but everyone does. Some people just don't realize it because they're so genius at it. It comes so easily to them that they don't even realize that other people can't do it, right? But everyone has their genius. And I like the way that you put it earlier, where you said it's about developing the other skills to a level where that genius can be expressed in whatever way. You know, some people don't want to put it out there in the world, but they might want to be able to do something with it. So it's about developing the skills that aren't as highly developed, to a level that allows that to happen. I think that's really the aim in the end.
Yeah, yeah, it's great. And I did read through the Seven Seeds framework, and I just really wanted to quickly touch on you had different types of students, and I thought, this was such a keen observation, and also just to tie it into these principles are helpful for everyone, including students who are at a regular school, Monday to Friday.
Yeah.
These things are still helpful, and they're helpful even for the student who's doing fine. So I really liked that in your list of students, there was the easy student, the creative, the one who's just fine, the fidget, the star student, and the social butterfly. And I think sometimes probably people are a little bit of a mix. Like I was a mixture probably of easy and star student. So exactly that kid where it was like, she's doing great at school. Um, Everything's fine. She's very self-contained, I was good at the things that were awarded, so the reading and the writing, but to be honest, I had massive gaps in things like spatial awareness. And just like you, I was aware that I wasn't good at everything, but I was playing it safe and getting my tick boxes for the things that I was. Um, so I think, yeah, it's really interesting to notice that even if your kid loves school and they may really love it, there might still be ways of supporting their development so that they're more of themselves, they're more creative, they're more joyful. Yeah.
Absolutely. I
And
think
I
that
was
there's
wondering which one were you? Which student were you?
I learned how to play the game really early on. Like
Yeah.
I laugh at this now, but I actually, in hindsight, I realized what I did was I was actually intuitively tuning into my teachers all the way through primary
Oh,
school,
and
high
being like, what do
school.
they want?
What
Yeah.
do they want from me? Yeah. I
Yeah.
would even know what each teacher would ask on the exam, and I would just learn that
Mm,
because I could see where their focus was. I could see what they cared about. So I knew exactly what to give them. Right. So, I played the game. Did it serve me? Probably not. Probably not, because it hid the gaps. Right? I was very good at hiding the gaps and delivering what would please
mm,
rather than actually speaking the truth of where I was at, which means that my emotional awareness, my self-awareness, so even seeds 1 and 2, like awareness of my body, where my body parts were in space, what I was actually feeling, emotions was, on the scale of 0 to 100 was probably at the 0 to 5 level. And I'm serious, until I was probably in my 20s, maybe even older.
mm,
So
mm.
because I knew how to deliver and I knew how to smile very well, everyone thought I was doing great. And
Yeah.
underneath that, I really wasn't. So I put those categories in there because kids can look like they're doing okay, especially the smart ones. The smart ones, the smarter they are, the more they're going to look like they're doing okay. And if they get a sense that parents worry about them, they're going to play to that and they're going to appear even more okay because they don't want to stress the parents out. Right. So the aware kids, the smart kids, the clever kids, and often these are the kids with the diagnoses, right? They're super smart. Now, back in the 90s, when I started working in this, the early 90s, autism, spectrum disorders were really, that stuff was only just starting to come out. And I remember working with these kids and thinking, wow, these kids are smarter than anybody I know. We just can't get to it. Like I could feel it, I could see it. So, if they're highly functioning, there's so much stuff that can be missed because they're clever enough to work out what the adults want from them. Yeah. And then there's all this stuff going on underneath. So then with the and when I say smart, I don't mean book smart, I don't mean street smart, I just mean the aware kids, which is I think
Yeah.
who we're really talking about here. Kids these days are so much more aware than when I was a young child. The like Earth is going through some kind of an evolution. I don't know what it is. I haven't spoken about it a lot. I don't really research it, but I can feel that there's an increase in awareness. But of course, with that comes an increase in responsibility from the parents to be communicating with the children on a level where they're on level, where there's not this teacher-child dynamic, parent-child dynamic, but we're almost co-parenting with our children nowadays. That's what
Yeah.
kids
I
need
always
to be.
think it's kind of like you still have to be responsible and set boundaries and stuff, but it's a co-creative kind of a journey, and yeah, being open to learning from them because they do have so much wisdom when we can access it.
They do.
Yeah,
They do. And I think
yeah.
the biggest thing that any parent can give a child is the awareness that if there is something they want to work on, there is a way. If something starts to matter to them, even if it doesn't matter to them now,
Mm,
if something becomes important, if a skill becomes important for them to develop, they need to know that they're not stuck in whatever level of ability or capacity they're in right now, that there is always a way. And yes, that it will take some effort, some input on their part. They're going to have to do something
mm,
to develop that skill, but that there's always a way. I think that
yeah,
that is the thing.
I love that. And so that's probably a good place to just about wrap up is, yeah, giving ourselves and our children the confidence to know that we can do these things we want to do. And if something's difficult, there will be a reason and we can work with it. Don't have to give up on our dreams because we're, whatever it is, clumsy or tone deaf or
Yeah,
if you know in your heart that something is for you, but there's a gap there, doesn't mean you have to give up on that and
yeah.
feel like you can't do it. Yeah.
Got to unwind the clock and go back to wherever that gap was. And once that's filled, the inner wisdom of the body just takes over and it fills in all the other gaps that came from that. So that's the beauty of this, the simplicity, right? You mentioned the word simple. I love simplicity. When you fill the gap over here, then everything that rests on just takes care of itself. The body, mind, spirit, the energy, or whatever it is that we actually are. And all of what we actually are has so much wisdom that we just need to offer it the key. And I think that's yeah, it's great.
Yeah, beautiful. So thank you so much for coming on to talk to me. And we'll put some links where people can find you. But if there's anything else you want to mention now about where people can find you or how they can follow your work, then yeah, go for it.
Sure. Sure. So I'm actually working on a new website, which isn't live yet, but it will be in the next week. And it's
Cool.
just simply sevenseedseducation.com. You can use the number seven or the word, so sevenseedseducation.com. So that's coming. But right now I do have an activities guide, which I think is really great because it's like the 10 foundational activities that every child needs to go through. They go through them naturally, but if there's blocks, then sometimes they miss out. So I think this is important for parents to know. And you can actually grab that right now. It's under sevenseedsactivities.com and you can just download it right now. That's live and ready to go.
Amazing. All right. Thank you
There's
so
more, but I'll
much.
keep it at that. I'll keep it simple.
Yeah, we can add links. That's all good. So yeah, thank you again, and we'll see you next time here on Neurodiversity Controversy. Okay, sending lots of
Thank you,
love.
Kirsty, and thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Great to be here. So